What's happening, folks? We're back for the second movement in the symphonic suite by Nikolai Rimsky-Korsakov, Sheherazade, and I do have a couple corrections, or rather one stipulation and one correction. The correction is Sinbad is actually an Arab character. Apparently the mythology of Sinbad is that he comes from Baghdad. I thought he was Persian, so that's my mistake, and hopefully I'll have remembered to put that in the description or maybe even a pinned comment in the previous reaction. But yes, he is, as the story goes, from Baghdad. But secondarily, that leitmotif, I believe, or at least the main motif that keeps recurring throughout these four movements of the suite at large, is the Sheherazade theme herself, or it's the theme of the storyteller who is providing these tales to, again, avoid her own execution, which is why it makes perfect sense that you hear it in each time, or in each movement in the suite at large, because it's her beginning to weave elegantly and tell another tale. So yes, I believe we hear it right at the beginning of this one, just like with the previous one, and so it will continue. And yes, this is the Kalender Prince, which I've seen spelled differently. Here it's spelled Kalender. I've also seen it spelled Kalendar, so yeah, I'm not quite sure which is the more correct spelling, and obviously it'd be a translation from Arabic to begin with. In any case, yes, we get a sense that maybe this will relate to someone who is a royal or a member of a royal house, someone with prestige and authority, and in that regard, again, I don't have details as to how this story might be told as part of Sinbad's adventures, or presumably as its own separate saga in the larger collection of stories. But yes, I have no details on the story itself. In any case, let's give it a listen. This is the Philharmonia Orchestra of London with Enrique Batiz conducting. It's the second movement of Rimsky-Korsakov's Sheherazade Symphonic Suite, and it is the Kalender Prince. it's just brilliant. It's so rich. It does have an exotic feel, but also there's tender emotion, there's drama, there's intensity. It really feels like we watched a narrative. Now, again, I don't know the details of this narrative, but it feels like there's, again, both peril and triumph across the course of it. And this, without remembering this going into this suite, this is the particular movement or part of the suite that comes to mind when I think of Scheherazade. So, yeah, this is perhaps my favorite, even though I didn't recall it as that by the name. I just love the way that dramatic melody, which sort of comes in and then speeds up and then leads to that big, almost, marching kind of triumphant melody. We hear it in some different arrangements, some different configurations over the course of the piece. So I think it is quite beautiful, and I enjoy the evolution of it and the, again, evolving arrangement of the different instruments playing that lead melody or emphasizing a particular part of it and then being surrounded by the other sections of the orchestra. So yes, we do also have some, let's say, less common instruments in the orchestra playing key parts. The triangle again is there. We have the harp at one or two moments. So yeah, it's a very dynamic piece. And as I said, I think this is, at least as I sit here now and having just heard that, it's the piece that, number one, I think of when I think of Scheherazade, which it's a bit of a cheat because I do think of that melody, which I now understand to be Scheherazade's theme, and she's the one telling these stories, so it's actually in all of them. But this piece at large is the one that I recall when I think of Scheherazade. But it's also, I think, one of the most, let's say, energetic. I think there's one that's coming, I don't know if it's the next one or the last one, which has a lot of like softer and sweeter melodies, but this one has a bit of that, but also a lot of drama as well. So I think it's a very multifaceted movement in the larger suite. So once again, I think it's brilliant. I love it. It is, as I said, the second of four, so we have two more to go. And the next one is The Young Prince and the Young Princess. And I think that may be the one that has a lot of like sweeter and, let's say, romantic or more emotional sonics. And then the final one is Festival at Baghdad, and then again the Sea. So Festival at Baghdad dash the Sea. So yes, do tell me what you think of this one. Shout out once again to the Philharmonia Orchestra of London and Enrique Batiz. And I will see you for the next movement. Peace.